Geneva, Switzerland, June 2025. The air inside the hall of the Global Economic Freedom Summit was stiff, heavy with wealth, strategy, and unspoken dominance. Rows upon rows of dark luxury suits lined the glass-walled auditorium, polished shoes reflecting the billion-dollar lighting. Vivek Ramaswamy stood at the podium, confident, sleek, grinning. Behind him, a massive digital banner glowed in blue. Prosperity through capitalism. Investing in the Global South. Seated silently in the second row was Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's youthful president, wearing a simple brown Sahelian tunic. No tie, no expensive watch, no notes in hand. Cameras flashed. World Bank heads nodded politely. IMF executives smiled from their reserved seats. Elon Musk whispered something into a diplomat's ear. Even the Kenyan president sat still, unsure what to expect. Traoré was quiet. Vivek's voice thundered, "Africa must stop blaming history and start building vision. Capitalism is the greatest force for human progress. Aid dependence has made leaders lazy, complacent." The crowd began to clap. Then a finger raised from the corner. A moderator noticed. He whispered something into his headset. The mic was passed to Traoré. He stood up slowly. People leaned in, and then, "We don't need saviors. We need you to leave." Silence struck like lightning. For a moment, the entire world stood still. Not a single clap, not a single cough, not even the sound of a breath. Vivek Ramaswamy's smile faltered, his fingers gripping the podium like it might float away. Elon Musk shifted uncomfortably. The moderator blinked twice. On social media, live streams paused. Someone's coffee spilled unnoticed on the carpet. President Traoré didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He sat back down as calmly as he had stood, his eyes scanning the room, not with anger, but with something deeper: pain, conviction, dignity. A young African journalist in the back wiped tears from her eyes. A Ghanaian delegate whispered, "Did he just—" but couldn't finish her sentence. Back in Ouagadougou, a small internet cafe erupted in cheers. In Johannesburg, students watching the summit stood up and applauded the screen. In Lagos, a mechanic threw his oil-stained rag at the wall in joy. By nightfall, the clip had already reached 46 million views. Someone posted on Twitter, 10 words. That's all it took. Africa's spine just grew taller. But inside the hall in Geneva, the room remained frozen. Everyone waited for someone, anyone, to say something. But nobody did, because they had all just heard the truth. Later that evening, behind thick glass and velvet-curtained walls, the after-dinner discussions were less polite. Vivek was furious. "Did he come here to insult us?" An IMF director muttered, "Unprofessional." A French diplomat added, "This is why partnerships are difficult." But a woman from Namibia, seated quietly in the shadows, finally spoke up. Or maybe he said what the rest of us have always wanted to say, but we're too afraid to. That sentence rippled like an earthquake through the private room. Meanwhile, Traoré didn't attend the evening cocktail. He wasn't in the presidential suite or mingling at the tech showcase. He had gone walking, alone, through Geneva's quiet streets, wearing only his tunic and a pair of well-worn sandals. A Swiss hotel staffer noticed him and offered directions. Traoré smiled. "No need, brother. I'm just breathing. That's all." Back at the summit, his words were being dissected, debated, denounced. But in Accra, in Nairobi, in Dakar, children were repeating those 10 words to their parents. Schools were discussing it in assembly. University students were rewatching it between lectures. TikTok was flooded with reaction videos. One caption read, "Traoré didn't just speak for Burkina Faso, he spoke for us all." What no one knew yet was that the 10 words were just the beginning. That same night, far from the lights of Geneva, a mother sat under a flickering bulb in a small home in rural Malawi. Her name was Chikondi. Her hands were stained from peeling cassava all day. Her 5-year-old daughter, Tadala, was asleep beside her, a pot of plain porridge cooling on the stove. A neighbor burst in without knocking. "Chikondi, did you hear what that Burkina Faso president said?" "What?" she asked, confused. "He told the rich people to leave Africa alone." The neighbor pulled out an old phone. The screen was cracked, the battery low, but the video played. Chikondi stared at the man in the simple brown tunic, standing calmly in front of the most powerful people in the world. Then she heard it. "We don't need saviors. We need you to leave." She blinked. Her heart tightened. She had never heard a president sound like that. Not pleading, not begging, not smiling for loans. She whispered to herself, almost like prayer, "He sees us." For the first time in years, she felt something heavy rise from her chest, hope, fierce and warm. And somewhere inside her she began to cry. Miles away in Washington, D.C., in a high-rise apartment overlooking the Capitol, a man named Robert Mitchell sat alone at 2 a.m., unable to sleep. He was a former Peace Corps volunteer, now an investor in African tech startups. He had met presidents, been to summits, funded change. But as he rewatched the clip of Traoré's speech, a lump formed in his throat. He remembered a dusty village in northern Ghana where he once tried to donate laptops. The villagers had asked for clean water instead. He didn't listen. Now, as Traoré's words echoed in his mind, "We don't need saviors." They burned. Robert had thought himself a helper, a bridge, a builder. But maybe, just maybe, he had been part of the problem. He opened his email app, hovered over an upcoming investment in a mining tech company set to displace 600 villagers in the DRC. Then he deleted it. No press release, no explanation, just silence. And as the sun began to rise over DC, Robert sat still, haunted, humbled, and changed. In a school tucked within the bustling streets of Dakar, Senegal, a teacher named Awa asked her class a simple question the next morning. "Who is a hero to you?" Little Mohammed, only 9, raised his hand. "President Traoré." The class laughed. Some mocked his choice, but Awa silenced them. "Why him, Mohammed?" He pulled out a drawing from his notebook. It was a lion, standing tall, alone, but unafraid. "Because he's brave." He didn't shout, he didn't fight, but he told them to go away. He continued, "My papa says leaders always kneel, but Traoré didn't kneel." Awa stared at the boy. Tears welled in her eyes. Later that day, she took Mohammed's drawing and pinned it to the school wall. By lunchtime, every student was staring at it, and by evening, photos of the lion were on social media with the hashtag #Africa stands tall. Back in Geneva, the summit resumed, but not the same way. The schedule moved on, speakers were reshuffled, and the word Africa began to vanish quietly from the teleprompters. During a panel titled Global Investment Partnerships, French President Emmanuel Macron was asked directly, "Do you agree with President Traoré's remarks?" He smiled stiffly, then paused for 3 full seconds. "I think it's important to listen, even when we disagree." But everyone in the room saw it. His eyes flickered and he looked away. A camera caught it, zoomed in, paused on his face. That clip went viral too. Comments exploded. Even he knew Traoré was right. They couldn't deny the truth, so they looked away. A popular influencer from Kenya tweeted, "What scares them is not Traoré's tone, it's his truth." And in the halls of Geneva, the leaders weren't smiling anymore. Because for the first time, the global south wasn't whispering, it was roaring. By day 2 of the summit, Traoré's seat was empty. He had left Geneva in the middle of the night. No press, no photos, no convoy. Just a silent departure, as if the message had already spoken for itself. Inside the conference hall, his absence became a presence. Every panel that discussed Africa looked awkward. Every speaker that praised inclusive progress stumbled. Even Ramaswamy, once confident and loud, seemed unsure. His speeches now lacking the fire they once had. During a closed-door session, a British official was heard whispering. He said 10 words, and now nobody knows what to say. In Burkina Faso, crowds filled the streets, not for protest, but celebration. Songs were written, drums were beaten. Children walked with signs that read, "We don't need saviors." But at the same time, something heavier was rising in the shadows. Pressure. Pressure from global banks, silent threats, postponed agreements, cold silence in diplomatic inboxes. Traoré knew what would come next, and he was ready. Because truth always has a cost. In a small room in Ouagadougou, Traoré sat at his desk, staring at a letter. It was written the day before he left for Geneva. Handwritten, honest, private. It wasn't addressed to the UN or the IMF. It wasn't for the world's billionaires or Western press. It was for his father, a man who had died when Traoré was just 17, killed in a mining riot when foreign contractors seized village land. Traoré kept the letter in his pocket throughout the summit, folded 3 times. Now, back home, he finally opened it again. His handwriting was steady, simple. "Baba, I went there today, the place where the world gathers. I didn't go to beg. I didn't go to ask. I went to speak. For you, for our land. I told them we don't need them. I told them to leave. And Baba, they listened." He folded it back. He didn't cry. But the silence in the room was so heavy, it almost wept for him. 3 days after the summit, a brown envelope was delivered to Burkina Faso's presidential office. No stamps, no markings, just a sealed envelope hand-delivered by a diplomatic visitor. Inside, a single document. Suspension of trade deals, aid contracts frozen, sanctions threatened in the interest of regional security. No names, just a signature from an unnamed Western coalition. It was quiet economic warfare, the kind that doesn't make headlines but breaks nations. Traoré sat with his cabinet. One advisor trembled while reading the document. "Sir, this could cripple us," he whispered. "We might lose fuel, medicine. Foreign accounts may be blocked." Another minister said, "We could issue a statement. Soften your words, maybe." Traoré looked up. "Should I say we need saviors now?" he asked. The room went still. "No," someone whispered. "You said the truth, and we stand by it." He stood, walked to the window, and stared at the dry horizon of his country. "Let them freeze the aid. We will boil our own water." And with that, Traoré made a phone call, not to the West, but to his neighbors, and the future began to stir. The first call was to Mali, then to Guinea, then to Niger, then Senegal, then Tanzania. Within 5 days, a small coalition of African nations announced something bold: the Pan-African Resource Bloc, an alliance based on local cooperation, transparency, and zero dependency on Western aid. At first, the world laughed. How will poor countries fund this? They have no leverage. It's political theater. But then, Mali offered gold reserves, Guinea pledged bauxite, Tanzania offered tech engineers, Burkina Faso pledged agricultural surplus and solar research. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't fast, but it was theirs, and it was spreading. Young Africans all over the continent began posting with the hashtag Build Without Begging in Ghana. University students held a Traoré Truth March. In Nigeria, a local musician dropped a hit single called 10 Words. In Ethiopia, a street mural appeared overnight. Traoré, drawn with a lion's mane behind him. They didn't see him as a president anymore. They saw him as a spark. One evening, in the middle of yet another meeting, a handwritten note was passed to President Traoré. It was from his mother. He hadn't seen her in weeks. She lived quietly in a modest home, far from the palace.
The note read, "My son, I see what they are saying. I hear the news. I also hear the silence that follows you. But do not worry. I remember when your father was beaten for refusing to move his crops for foreign bulldozers. I remember you holding his hand, crying. I see now you carry his voice. I am proud. You have already won. Love." Mama Traoré folded the note and held it to his chest. For the first time in days, he allowed a tear to fall. Not from fear, not from exhaustion, but from the kind of pain that comes only when love and purpose collide.
In a dusty village outside Bamako, Mali, a 12-year-old boy named Ismail sat cross-legged beside a small homemade radio. His father had built it using scrap metal, old phone wires, and a cracked solar panel. Every evening, they listened together, tuned to distant frequencies, trying to catch the voices of the world. That night, a regional station replayed Traoré's speech, again. Ismail listened closely. When it ended, he turned to his father. "Papa, why do they hate him for saying we should stand?" His father didn't answer right away. He looked up at the stars, then finally said, "Because people fear the man who stands when he is told to kneel." Ismail nodded. That night, he wrote something on a torn piece of cardboard and hung it on the door of their hut. "I will stand like Traoré." His photo went viral the next day. Barefoot, cardboard sign, big eyes, a lion drawn on his shirt with charcoal, captioned simply, "He gave us a new kind of hero." And across Africa, thousands of children began drawing lions. Meanwhile, in a place far removed from summits and sanctions, Pope Francis was handed a transcript of Traoré's speech. He read it in silence, then asked his aide, "Do you know what this reminds me of?" The aide shook his head. "Christ overturning the tables in the temple." He folded the paper and placed it on his desk. "Sometimes," he added, "God sends prophets, not diplomats." That quote was never meant to be public, but a staff member leaked it to an African Catholic news outlet. And suddenly the headline blazed across screens in Uganda, Rwanda, Mozambique. "Pope Traoré speaks like a prophet." Millions read it. And many cried, not out of pride, but because for the first time, someone powerful had truly seen them. Traoré never responded to the Pope's comment, but his silence said more than words ever could. Then came the retaliation. 2 weeks after the summit, the U.S. announced the closure of its development office in Burkina Faso. The EU followed, slashing funding for security training. Embassy lights dimmed, meetings were canceled, aid organizations began quietly packing their bags. To the West, it was strategy. To the people, it was punishment. In the capital, fear began to grow. Markets slowed. Pharmacies ran out of imported medicine. A rumor spread that internet restrictions would follow. People whispered in taxis and mosques, "What now?" Traoré went on national television. No suit, no guards. Just him, seated in front of a plain wooden desk. "Yes, they are leaving. That was my request. But you are staying, and we will stand together. If we must grow food with our bare hands, we will. If we must teach our children under trees, we will. If we must walk in darkness to reach the light, we will. Because now, the land belongs to us again." When the speech ended, there was no music, no graphics, just quiet tears. In homes across the continent. In the hills of northern Burkina Faso, an old primary school was scheduled to shut down. Foreign funding had stopped. The teachers hadn't been paid in weeks. Supplies had run dry. But the headmistress, Madame Kadiatou, refused. She gathered her students under the mango trees near the schoolyard. "This land is still ours," she told them. "Our voices are still ours, and our minds must never go quiet." With nothing but chalk and flat stones, she continued teaching. The children arrived barefoot, some without lunch, others carrying their baby siblings on their backs. But they came, every day. One of them, little Zainab, age 8, was asked why. She pointed to a drawing she had made in the dirt, a man with a lion behind him. "Because Traoré is still standing," she said. "So I will too." A visiting journalist captured that moment. The photo made global headlines. When the classroom is courage, a new generation rises. Even CNN couldn't ignore it. And the world finally began to understand. This was not just political, this was spiritual. Then something no one expected happened. Weeks after the sanctions and walkouts, delegates from several Asian and South American countries arrived in Ouagadougou. Quietly, humbly, no press. One delegation from Brazil, another from Indonesia, even a small team from Pakistan. Their message was simple. "We've been watching. We believe in building together, not owning. We came to listen." Traoré received them in the presidential garden, under an acacia tree. No red carpet, no translators, just tea, shared bread, and honest conversation. He didn't promise them riches. He didn't ask for handouts. He told them, "If we rise together, no one will own our future but us." In that moment, the balance of power began to shift. New trade deals, fair and transparent, were quietly drafted. Solar technology, agricultural exchange, education networks. A new dawn was forming, not from noise, but from dignity. And once again, the world was watching. 1 year later, June 2026, the Global Economic Freedom Summit was held again. New banners, new slogans. But something was missing. Traoré didn't attend. He declined, politely, powerfully. Instead, a young girl from Burkina Faso took the stage. It was Zainab, now 9, fluent in 3 languages, dressed in a lion print dress she made with her mother. She stood in front of the same crowd that once went silent for Traoré. She took a breath and said, "You didn't listen to him, but we did. He said 10 words, and we made a world from them. We don't want pity, we want our voice. And if you won't give us a seat, we'll build our own table." The room erupted, this time in tears and thunderous applause. Across the world, millions watched. And for the first time, no one saw Africa as weak. They saw it as awake. If this story moved you, if it made you cry, if it made you believe again in truth, courage, and dignity, please do this one thing for me. Like this video. Comment the words, "I stand with the lion." Subscribe for more powerful emotional stories that make the world feel. Together, let's spread this message. Let's make sure those 10 words never die. We don't need saviors, we need you to leave. And now, the world will never forget.